They called it financial fair play, a law to save football from itself, to protect tradition, to protect competition. At least that's what they told us. But what if I told you it was never about fairness? What if the game's richest clubs actually wanted these rules? What if the same system that promised to stop cheating was designed to make sure the big clubs never lost power? It's not a fairy tale. It's not even a tragedy. It's a business plan, and it's still running today. Summer 2011. UEFA President Michel Platini stands behind a podium in Nyon, Switzerland. Cameras flash. He's smiling. The smile of a man who thinks he's saving football. From now on, he says, clubs will have to live within their means. No more reckless spending. No more bankrupt owners. No more sugar daddies turning small clubs into playthings. The message was simple. If you spend more than you earn, you will be punished. Newspapers called it the end of the arms race. Fans of smaller clubs hoped for a miracle. Maybe now they'd have a fighting chance. But the reality? The rules weren't built for the underdogs. They were built to protect the kings of the game. Real Madrid, Manchester City, Bayern Munich, and the rest of the European elite. Because when you look closely, financial fair play didn't close the gap. It poured concrete in it. This is the story of how FFP was born, why was it never truly fair, and how it locked football into an era of financial inequality it still can't escape. To understand financial fair play, you have to rewind. Back to the early 2000s, a different kind of football world. Back then, money was starting to flood the game, but it wasn't coming from where you might think. Yes, big clubs made big money, but anyone with the right billionaire could crash the party. Chelsea did it first. 2003. Roman Abramovich buys the club for £140 million. Within months, he's spending like a man who's just unlocked unlimited mode in Football Manager. Claude Makélélé, Hernan Crespo, Damien Duff, Didier Drogba. Chelsea went from Champions League hopeful to Premier League powerhouse in one summer. The old giants, United, Arsenal, Milan, Madrid, they didn't like it. Not because Chelsea were cheating, but because Chelsea were winning. Then came Manchester City, 2008, bought by Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi United Group. The first year, they spent £150 million on new players. Robinho, Pablo Zabaleta, Vincent Kompany, a blueprint for domination. Suddenly, the established order was under threat. Old money didn't want to be replaced by new money. And somewhere in all this chaos, UEFA decided something had to change. Officially, they said it was about financial health. Clubs were racking up debts they couldn't pay. Portsmouth, Leeds United, Fiorentina all crashed under financial weight. The narrative was perfect. Protect clubs from bankruptcy, protect fans from losing their team, protect football's future. But here's the problem. The solution they proposed didn't just stop reckless spending, it stopped certain kinds of reckless spending. If your club has already made hundreds of millions a year, congratulations, you could keep spending it. But if you were a small club with a rich owner, sorry, that money doesn't count. It was a system designed to make sure the ladder stayed exactly where it was. 2014. The ink on UEFA's new rulebook was barely dry when the first headlines hit. Manchester City, guilty. Paris Saint-Germain, guilty. On paper, it looked like justice. Two oil-rich clubs, two huge fines, proof the system worked. But dig deeper and you realize something strange. City's punishment? A €60 million fine, reduced to €20 million if they behaved. A smaller Champions League squad for one season, and a promise to spend less temporarily. For a club backed by Abu Dhabi's billions, it was pocket change. Not a ban, not a title stripped, just a slap on the wrist. And a warning not to make the rich boys too nervous. PSG? Same deal. Punished for inflating their sponsorship deal with the Qatar Tourism Authority. A contract worth €200 million a year, signed with their own government. UEFA cut the value in the books, issued a fine, shrunk the squad size, but here's the twist. While the punishments looked harsh, they sent a clear message. You can break the rules, just don't break them too much. Meanwhile, further down the football food chain, smaller clubs felt the real squeeze. Take Malaga CF. 2012, they'd just shocked Europe, reaching the Champions League quarterfinals with a squad built by Qatari owner Sheikh Abdullah Al Thani, Isco, Joaquin, Demichelis, Santa Cruz. They were building something magical. Then FFP came knocking. Unpaid wages, overdue transfer fees. UEFA banned them from European competition for a year. For Malaga, that was the death blow. No Champions League money, no star players willing to stay. They crumbled back into mid-table obscurity and haven't returned since. That's the thing about FFP. If you're already at the top, you can take the hit. If you're climbing, one penalty and you fall straight back down. And in the boardrooms of Europe's elite, that was exactly the point. You have to understand something about football's big clubs. They don't just win on the pitch, they win in the meeting rooms. Before financial fair play was ever a press release, it was a whisper, a closed-door conversation in the corridors of power. Picture this, a luxury hotel in Brussels, 2009. Not the UEFA HQ, not a stadium, a private conference with representatives from Europe's most powerful clubs. Bayern Munich's Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, Real Madrid's Florentino Perez, Manchester United's David Gill, and the newly formed European Club Association, a lobbying group created to represent clubs' interests. Their real interest, making sure the football economy stayed predictable. No sudden shocks, no surprise billionaires turning tiny clubs into title contenders overnight. They pitched it as protecting heritage, but the truth, they were protecting market share. Here's how it worked. They pushed UEFA to measure spending only against football-generated revenue, TV rights, matchday tickets, sponsorship deals, all of which the big clubs had in massive supply. Bayern's Allianz Arena sold out every week. United's global shirt sales dwarfed entire leagues. Madrid's sponsorship portfolio stretched across every continent. If you were them, financial fair play was perfect. They could outspend everyone and still comply, because their starting point was already hundreds of millions ahead of anyone else. And UEFA? They agreed. Not just because it sounded responsible, but because these clubs had leverage. Remember, UEFA needs the Champions League to be attractive. They need the big names in the knockout rounds. A Champions League without Madrid, Bayern, United, television deals collapse. Sponsors pull out. So when the rich clubs say, "We want these rules," UEFA listens. By the time financial fair play was officially announced in 2011, the framework was already tilted. It looked fair on paper, but in practice, it was like starting a marathon where some runners get a 10-kilometer head start. The underdogs didn't just have to run faster. They had to run impossibly faster. And for the giants, the race had never been easier. Rules only work if people want to follow them. The big clubs never wanted to follow them. They wanted to master them. And they did. Financial fair play said you couldn't spend more than you earned. Fine. So they found ways to earn more. Not by selling tickets, not by winning trophies, but by changing what income actually meant. Let's talk sponsorship inflation. Remember PSG's €200 million a year deal with the Qatar Tourism Authority? That wasn't some random company throwing money at a football club. It was the Qatari government paying their own club and calling it sponsorship. On the books, it was revenue. In reality, it was a cash injection disguised as marketing. Manchester City pulled a similar move. Etihad Airways, the stadium name, the shirts, the training complex. All wrapped in deals worth far more than the market rate, all signed with companies tied to their owners in Abu Dhabi. UEFA investigated both. Financial fair play fines followed, but the clubs, they carried on. Because even when they were punished, the money was already spent, the players already bought. Then there was creative accounting. Some clubs started stretching transfer fees over ridiculously long contracts. Buy a player for €100 million, spread the cost over 8 years instead of 4. On the books, it looked like €12.5 million a year. In reality, you still paid €100 million, and just when UEFA tried to close that loophole, clubs found another. Player swaps became the new magic trick. Club A sends player X to Club B for €60 million. Club B sends player Y to Club A for €60 million. No real money changes hands, but on paper, both clubs record a €60 million profit instantly. That profit then gets used to meet financial fair play targets, even though no one actually got richer. It became an arms race of lawyers and accountants. Every time UEFA adjusted the rules, the clubs adjusted faster. And the smaller clubs? They didn't have the accountants. They didn't have the networks. They didn't have the political weight to push back. Financial fair play had created a new reality. Success wasn't just about football anymore. It was about who had the smartest lawyers, the friendliest sponsors, and the deepest political connections. And in that world, the same clubs kept winning, both on and off the pitch. More than a decade since its birth, financial fair play's fingerprints are everywhere. You see them in the transfer market. You see them in the Champions League. You see them in the widening gap between football's rich and everyone else. Before financial fair play, there was at least a chance for disruption. Abramovich's Chelsea, Mansour's Manchester City, Qatar's PSG. Even Malaga and Monaco had moments where sudden investment shook the table. Now, the table is bolted to the floor. If you're not already in the top tier of revenue, the climb is almost impossible, not because your scouts are bad, not because your academy is poor, but because financial fair play locks your spending to what you already earn. In 2022, the Deloitte Football Money League reported something staggering. The top 10 richest clubs in the world now earn more than the next 20 combined. And every single one of those top 10 has been a Champions League regular for over a decade. It's a self-reinforcing loop. Big clubs make big money buys big players win big trophies make bigger money. Meanwhile, the dream of a Leicester City-style miracle in European football, almost extinct. UEFA knows this. They've even started replacing financial fair play with something called the squad cost rule, capping spending at a percentage of revenue. But guess what? It's just financial fair play with a different name. Still tied to revenue, still rewarding the rich, still punishing ambition if it comes from the wrong source. And yet they'll keep selling it as fairness, as financial responsibility, as the best thing to happen to football in decades. Because if they ever admitted the truth that the system was built to keep the same clubs at the top, they'd also have to admit something even darker. The modern game is less competitive now than it's ever been. They called it fair play, but fairness was never the point. The point was control. To make sure the gates to football's castle stayed shut. To make sure only the chosen few had the keys. And it worked. The giants got bigger. The gap got wider. And the dreamers, the clubs who dared to rise too fast, were told to wait their turn. But here's the thing about football. It doesn't belong to the billionaires. It doesn't belong to UEFA. It belongs to the people who fill the stands week after week, believing that anything is possible. Maybe one day, the rules will match the spirit of the game. Maybe one day, fair play will mean fair. Until then, the ladder stays pulled up. The castle gates stay locked. And the rest of us? We're left watching from the outside, waiting for a miracle that the system was designed to prevent.